Latest edition of Raising the Bar Live. Today, it is truly my pleasure to have my friend Rose Fath back with us. And we are going to talk about all of the nuts and bolts thing in with business transformation. I think it's the beginning of 2024, and so many people have great plans for their businesses and so many goals that they want to accomplish. But sometimes how to get from point A to point B, particularly if there's a little distance between those two things, can be a little bit challenging. And Rose is one of the pioneers of business transformation and has the best advice for how to make everybody come along for the ride. So thank you for joining me again today.
It's wonderful to be with you again, Allison. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I always say I love the way Allison articulates things. I don't know if I'm the best advice, but I do have some experience and, at least some suggestions that I can make based on some early failures that I learned about transformation. So that might be a good way to start, is to say, it's an experiment, and I've had a lot of opportunity to experiment.
Well, experiment leads to progress, right?
Right.
So let's kind of just start from the beginning. I want to transform my business. I want to go from A to B, or maybe the better thing to say is I want to go from A to Z. What is the best first step in starting a business transformation process?
Yeah. So I want to prefix this a little bit with a tiny bit of context. In 1993, I was asked to leave a region presidency role within a Fortune 100 company that I was working at for quite a number of years, over to become what was the chief transformation officer. And no one knew what that meant. It was sort of the new vogue. And I want to start by saying transformation is not the same as change management.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first step is understanding what you mean by transformation. Everybody feels like they have to transform their business. Maybe not everybody does need to transform their business. So the first step is to think through why. What's going on in my business? If I could make something happen that I haven't been able to make happen, step one, what would that look like? What do I want to accomplish? Number one. What's standing in my way? Number two. What would help me clear the way? Number three. That's the first step in the process, is to just uncouple why you're transforming. Is your business model out of gas? Are you losing your relevance? Are you not growing anymore? Do you lack the opportunity to scale? Are you not profitable? There are four considerations to every business. The very first one, and the most important one, is relevance. If you are no longer relevant, Kodak, during the digital time, had their Kodak moment. They didn't think they needed digital, and then they became irrelevant. Blockbusters, these are all common themes. Blockbusters made their money punishing customers with late fees. Not a way to be relevant. So you need to just think it through and say to yourself, Xerox, we were the copier company. I was part of that company. The facts are, we began to lose our relevance when print on demand came in, and having a copier in a room next door to you was not the answer. So first thing we have to do is, what is this business transformation like? Now, what do I mean by the fact that transformation and change management are two different things? I went to Palo Alto Research early days in 1993 to try to understand transformation. There were practice labs, and this is where Stephen Jobs got all his intellectual capital. Anyway, John Seely Brown was the chief scientist. I'm a storyteller, so I want you to hear it this way. And I said to him, what do you think transformation is? And how's that different than change? People are always saying people resist change. And John goes, oh, that's my biggest issue. There's always a reason to resist change. What am I changing from to? Why am I changing? People persist, Rose, in what is, if they don't understand what will be. And you have to have clarity around that. They're not resisting change. They're resisting the lack of clarity and the ambiguity around what you're doing. So he says, when you think about transformation, no company can completely change its DNA and should not. IBM went from big iron to software, but they never changed their DNA, which is if you do business with us, it's like an insurance policy. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. We will make sure. People had confidence in that. That did not change. Transformation is transitioning your existing form to take a new action. You broke the word apart. That helped me so much. So taking initial steps, why is it that I want to do it? What do I want to accomplish by doing it? And what's standing in my way? Then you can begin to start to build the plan toward how you are going to transition from where you are today to where you want to go.
I want to go back to something you said. You said, I'm telling the story and I want you to hear it my way. I want you to unpack that a little bit for me, because I think that storytelling is so important in any sort of change management or business transformation. Is you have to give people a place to go. How do you frame your stories?
I think the most important thing is to talk about where we've been. History for me is a wonderful way to context things. Say you're standing in front of a group of people and you recognize that your business has had an extraordinary run. And you actually talk to that. We've had an extraordinary run. For many, many years, we were able to do things that nobody else could do. And now here we are. We're in this situation where we're not quite where we need to be. Years ago, Roosevelt did that with the garden hose, right? He was trying to explain how we could create an integrated supply chain across a number of things by you take your neighbor's garden hose, you hook it up to yours, you hook it, and that was the way he spoke about alliances. Stories give people a chance to see themselves in the picture.
And people always
see themselves in the picture, you can sort of be part of the story. And it evolves, and that narrative evolves as you go through. So information being shared, frankly, is a data dump. Stories being told is insight and wisdom and context, which people need desperately, usually has the what and the why in it. And all of a sudden it evolves a narrative that becomes your strategic narrative in any transformation that you're trying to do.
And how do I identify the best areas to start in transformation? Which of the 4 topics is it relevance? Is it growth?
Yeah. And think about startups. Relevance and growth, fabulous. Biggest Achilles heel, scale and profitability, right? So that's a high class problem for a startup, but they do have to deal with it. So they would then be looking at that. For companies that have been established for a very, very long time, they have to step back and say, okay, I'm getting the scale. In fact, I'm scaling to the point where I am stretched and I'm very profitable. I keep telling the street how good I am. But at the end of the day, I'm really not growing. I'm flat year over year and I'm spinning the numbers so that I can keep the profit going. Or I may be getting bad profits by stripping cost out of my business, layoffs, any number of things, change the benefit plan, do whatever I have to do to get the cost down so I can keep delivering profitability. So you look at those 4 considerations and you determine which of those things do I need to work on. Okay. And that becomes an area that you then validate and test. I think it's really important to get people closest to the work to do what I call rapid insight. That is a trademark of Fast Forwards, where you spend 15 to 30 minutes talking to people closest to the work to find out why. Why do you think this is happening? What's going on? What are our customers telling us? People that are the end user of our product, if you're an internal function, like yours, your health benefits.
Yep.
Would you have to ask the employees, what's missing? What's the problem? They come back, they give you a lot of really rich information. Today we have generative AT, you can throw AI, you can throw it into GPT, and you can get some good themes. Give it intelligent prompts. Here's what's coming out of our interviews with our people and our conversations. What are the key themes that are a part of this? It can spit it out. What would have taken a long time to research, 10, 15 minutes. Yep. And you have some key areas you can begin to look at and say, okay, here's the biggest advice I had to give myself. I always thought big change required big action. So if I'm going to transform, I have to do everything. When you do everything at once, and Xerox attempted to do that, you paralyze the system.
Okay.
It just completely clogs the system. Think of everyone in your house taking a shower at the same time.
Run out of water.
No hot water. You do the three big things. I work in threes. Ancient number. The Asians believed it was spiritually strong. And people can only remember three things. Mm-hmm. So start with the first three. Okay, I want this company to be more relevant. This is the feedback I've gotten. This is what generative AI has spit out and shared with me as my themes. What are the three big things I need to do to begin to start? And then you do the next right thing and get through those first three before you start the second three. In Xerox, we literally went to re-engineer every process in the company, from time to market to collection, to post-customer service, to integrated supply chain, all the way to the ledger.
Three at a time.
It was a mess. Mm-hmm. It was a mess. And we took a page out of Michael Hammer's book and Prahlad and Hamel and all the big subject matter experts. And literally, we created so much disruption, Allison, that we were drinking from a fire hose. Can't do it. So, and then the nice thing about doing it in an iterative way is you go slow to go fast. The old Gandhi thing, go slow to go fast. As you're iterating, you learn, and then you may make mid-course correction. It's like being in a sailboat. Yep. You know where the winds are going. So that's my advice on how to approach a large-scale transformation.
So small, consistent action every day. Best advice ever, I think. Consistency and persistency, I think. And small, I think that people always think big. Oh. We have to do all of these things. But smaller goes back to that old axiom where small hinges move big doors.
This is a terrible example, and I apologize up front, but it's extremely provocative. When 9/11 happened, mm-hmm. They didn't go after every building in the U.S. They took down very strategically. And it changed our lives forever, right? They went to the World Trade Center and they decided this is a symbol of the dollar, and life changed dramatically. A few significant actions can yield extraordinary results. And that, on a very negative way, is what happened. If you look at from a positive point of view, when the war in the Ukraine first started, Zelensky came out and said, I'm going to be out front. I'm going to be the leader you see. We're not leaving the Ukraine until we have taken care of our country. Yep. That was a leadership moment. Mm-hmm. Significant results. When Rosa Parks determined not to give her seat up on the bus, it changed a lot of practice. Every mm-hmm. person of color that was on that bus put their head down. They were scared. Sure. This Caucasian man, we don't even remember his name, that was standing next to her. We only remember that he's the one that went to the bus driver. The bus driver came back, said, I'll have to call the police. She says, you do what you have to do. Silent moment of, this doesn't seem right. We need to transform this practice. Let me start by just not getting up.
Yep.
It's that little something that just makes such a difference. And we all have to be part of that narrative. I mean, I think of Rosa and I think there was no way on that day, on that bus, that she ever dreamed Mandela would run off a plane and run to her, or that her children would read about her grandchildren would read about her in history books. Never in a million years. But she created a narrative that day.
She created movement for people.
Pardon me?
She created movement for people.
Absolutely.
She gave them space to move.
Absolutely. You look at Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. What was he trying to transform? Years and years of bias, but he did it little by little by little, one bold conversation at a time, right?
Yep.
Like the book, one conversation making bold change, one conversation at a time. That's the thing we've got to think about, not the do it all. I tried that and it backfired.
What have you found to be the most effective strategies to gain buy-in both from the team and stakeholders? Because there are sometimes two different constituencies.
Yeah.
So particularly when you're acquiring businesses or divesting yourself, what are the best strategies for managing those processes?
Well, there's a couple of different things that you said in that. So let's take how do I get the internal stakeholders on board? One is to start with the concern that you're dealing with. Most people start with the worldview. In my Chocolate Conversation book, I write about the 3 layers of a conversation: worldview, standards, and concerns. When you go in there with a great big worldview, everybody's like ready to argue because that's not my view. So a bottoms-up approach to actually start with, here's my concern. We aren't growing at the rate that we used to grow. I'm making this up right now, but that could be the reason. We're not growing at the rate that we used to grow. And I think it's because a lot of what we did do and once was great is not cruelly relevant anymore. I want to fix that problem. So I want to ask you where you think the issues are. Engage people in a discussion, in a dialogue, in a conversation. Feedback sessions, small groups, talk. Then when you get to the bigger group, you bring that out. You say, okay, now we're all here. We've had a chance to speak to a lot of people. Here were the concerns we were dealing with. Here's some of the feedback of how that could change. Here's what we're thinking we'd like to do. And we'd like to start small. And we want to make sure that we're on the right track. It's going to be messy. There will be some ambiguity. So I promise, I want to apologize up front. It won't be all clear. What I do promise is if we hit a roadblock, you'll be the first to know. We'll figure it out together. It's not being the tablets are coming down from the top and here you go.
Does that, I found
you got to do that.
Yeah, I see, I work with large, medium, small employers. And what I notice is that where there is more open communication and more transparency, there is automatically more buy-in. That sort of top down, we're going to do it this way and it's my way or the highway. That isn't working for people anymore. And younger people, because now I'm officially old, will simply not tolerate it.
Right.
You will not retain the talent that you need.
Right. I guess I'm always amazed by this next generation. We laugh about this, but I'm 75. When I first started in business, you weren't allowed to question. You just kind of did what you were asked to do. May have quietly questioned. But I think today I like the fact that young people are willing to speak out. And sometimes to our great benefit. I have young people in my firm that when they tell me I have kind of an alternate point of view, I want to hear it because I may have missed something along the way. Nobody knows everything. And you know what? Experience is a great gift, gives us a great deal of sage wisdom. And at the same time, it can also give us a lot of bias. So we have to be open to different points of view.
Yes. And how do you, in organizations that are transforming, and a lot of transformation is an older leadership to a younger leadership that may think a little bit differently and act a little bit differently. How do you ease that? How do you help people who are a little more hierarchical get comfortable with the idea that that isn't going to continue?
I think it's the opportunity to mix it up. There's a lot of work that's been going on in diversity and inclusion. And the minute people hear that, they go, oh, yeah, that's that HR initiative. And that's about people of color, Latinos,
Yep.
Asian Americans, gay, whatever they want to think it is. That is so incredibly narrow in a view, because the diversity of inclusion is really about how do we think differently, and how does that young voice come into the conversation in a way that can be helpful. So the other day, here's a typical example. I got a request to go on and talk about leaders in cybersecurity and what my book would give them as a way of thinking differently, leaders who ran cybersecurity. So I called up my very young, very beautiful Christina and Jess, both young and beautiful, and I said, why would I want to do this? Book really isn't about cybersecurity. And I was just in one of those, I'm podcast to death, what can we do? And they looked at me on the Zoom and like, well, we could think about it a little differently. And I said, okay, tell me what you think. That's why I'm calling you. And Christina said, think about how insecure people feel today in the world, that they're troubled, that there's a lot going on, and how hard it is for cybersecurity to be a sexy part of the business. Here we are trying to protect data and protect what could take the whole business down, but no one cares until that happens. So in what ways can these leaders not be the nerds of the business, but actually share a narrative that could help people understand? And I thought about the classroom where if a shooter came in and they were giving live, kinds of experiences for kids to understand what to do.
Mm-hmm.
At first it was very frightening, right? But they got involved in the narrative. I said to myself, you know what? Maybe this is a good thing for me to do then. That's not such a bad thing. I talk all the time about leaders today have to wear a different mantle. It's not just about the business, it's what people are facing every day of what the turbulence is in the world today. So I got off there with a totally different perspective because a young person gave me a different perspective. That's a small example. I think if you're not willing to listen and learn, no matter how old you are, then you can't be effective in any transformation. Because that's the generation that's going to live through it, not you.
Yeah, correct. How do you start to measure success? I know you have you have this story that I just love about Estee Lauder and their purchase of MAC, and how there was, everybody seemed to want this for really great reasons, but there were some hiccups along the way. And once you got everybody talking to each other, you worked those out. Talk about how you measured the success of that, how you got people talking, and how you measured the success of that.
Yeah. Initially, of course, Estee Lauder was what they referred to as the good girl company. It was older, it was more established. You think youth do, and Estee. And R&D was very rigorous. I mean, we're talking scientists and biologists of great magnitude. The woman who literally found the alternative to animal testing, Barbara Wolf, was a chief scientist in R&D in Estee Lauder. Came out of MIT. Amazing woman. So all of a sudden you got MAC, this scrappy little Canadian company making fabulous lipstick and great colors. She wasn't doing treatment. They weren't doing the kinds of things that Lauder was doing. And they considered themselves, they named themselves the bad girl company. We're naughty. We do things scrappy.
Yep.
And they were really having a cultural clash. So we created a liaison position to bridge and broker across in both areas, MAC and Estee. And we found people that were porous and willing to listen to each other and willing to sort of carry the messages across. And we started to cultivate a different way of looking at the culture. Why did we purchase MAC? We wanted to get at a demographic we didn't know. They did. Why did they want to come to Estee Lauder? They wanted the scale, that they didn't have. So if we want these things, where are we willing to kind of come in and meet each other in the middle? So we developed a tool called the DNA sequence. And it starts here with culture, the way we do things around here, talent, the people that help us do it, our core competency. Is it innovation? Is it process effectiveness? Is it customer intimacy? Then we went over here and we said, okay, clients. Who do we want? Customers. Clients or customers? And ultimately, we said the customer base we want is 18 to 35. We don't have that in Estee Lauder. Mac was saying, we'd like to get into all the places Estee Lauder is so we can get to more of those.
Yep.
Good. Then we came back and they were very innovative, Mac. Estee Lauder was very operationally excellent. They both had some work to do in customer intimacy. We came back over and said, okay, what kind of talent do we need to make this work? And if culture is the way we do things around here, how willing are we to do them differently in the areas of where we want to get to market quicker? And we don't want that rigid R&D process, but we are willing to apply some of it so we can at least have credibility in how we get to market. That then became the blueprint for how we started to look at things. And people started talking to each other, working more effectively together. We cross-pollinated the talent. We brought people into each other's shops. And the success was that Mac became one of the profitable, revenue growth engines for Estee Lauder and a demographic they did not have. And Estee Lauder picked up some ways to do things a little more quick and dirty and get it to market faster. So those things helped with the ROI and with, scale and growth. And obviously becoming more relevant.
Yep. Everybody became more relevant. Mac became a Mac. You can get Mac anywhere now.
Yes, you can.
And Estee Lauder has a new demographic. And I see that a lot too in clients that we work with where they want to enter a new market, but those people speak a different language.
Because it's like, I want their customers and I want their strategy, but I'm not so crazy about their people and I really don't like their culture.
Yep. And culture rules all.
Not the other.
Yeah. Culture rules all, I think.
Right.
The way we do it.
Does rule all, because at the end of the day, it's like that movie, A Few Good Men. This wasn't all written down. These were unwritten rules that there's the authorized and the informal in every environment. And the informal is where you get the greatest amount of feedback.
Yes. Well, we don't do it that way.
Right.
So how, besides we don't do it that way, what are the most common challenges in driving business transformation?
Doing too much. Okay. I said that up front.
Yep.
Biting off much more than you can chew. That's probably the biggest one. The second one is not really having a clear picture of what you're really transforming to. And I see that all the time. We need to transform, okay?
Why?
Right. Having an unrealistic timeline.
Okay. What people think it's going to take so long, and sometimes it's faster and most of the times it's longer?
Yes. They have an unrealistic expectation of what you can accomplish in a period of time. I've seen companies get acquired and be told that they are going to be given the time they need to integrate within the larger company, sometime alone, ways in which, and the next thing we're looking for them to appreciate immediately. They want to slap their performance, bonuses, compensation plans, everything on these companies, and they can't handle it. And it's just a lot of unfortunate missteps that screw up what could have been a very healthy and good transformation.
Do you see that happen in just in acquisition, or do you see it happen with the large PE firms?
Yeah, it's
Because
not
they
just,
roll up and they want it fast.
they want it fast. It is incredibly difficult to work against a timeline that's unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly difficult. And it's not just in M&As. It's not. It can happen in any company that's not even worrying about, funding. Obviously, when you have, external funding and you've got these guys coming in, they want it immediately. And you have to determine there's consequences to that. I get fast money and the ability to scale and do the things I want to do, but I have to pay for that.
Yes, you do.
Somebody's going to come back with the bill for that. When I was at Gartner, the CEO of Gartner bet the market cap of the company, took a loan out without a floor, and for the market cap of the company, and he went with a very aggressive venture capitalist. Needless to say, the hen came to roost, and the next thing we knew, he was out, and the company ended up getting absorbed by another leader, and the whole thing, unfortunately, fell apart. These are the kinds of things that people don't think through. And this guy was a career consultant, came out of Bain, and smart, didn't have practical common practice. So you want to always think about, if I'm going to get, a venture capitalist to fund my business, what's their expectation? Did I get it in writing? Am I sure about what it is I'm asking them to do? And how much of my business am I willing to give up control over? And I'll tell you, when Fast Forward started, I got no funding, and I absolutely unequivocally said we will self-fund all the way, because I did not want to have that pressure.
We do the same thing. We're a little smaller than Fast Forward, but we do it too. And what I see is, I work, in my space, in the health insurance, healthcare space.
Yeah.
We see roll-ups with compliance. We see roll-ups with hospital systems. We see roll-ups with physician practices, with radiologist practices, with labs. And what happens then is that a lot of times the user experience gets put to the side. Mm-hmm. And the owners are typically very unhappy about that.
Yep.
But it's hard for people, right? It's hard for people who are generally not well. And it's very bad for health insurance costs, which is a
absolutely. I mean, that's a whole other, you talk about what's desperately needed in transformation. The whole insurance piece of the equation, and that whole way in which we operate around healthcare, that needs to be totally transformed.
So I was at a conference last week, and one of the speakers who we'll be doing a session with in early March, his name is David Balat, and he just wrote this fantastic rule in Texas. Now, rule in Texas, you can pay cash for services and it will credit to your in-network deductible. And his goal is, he comes out of the hospital systems, and his goal is to create a parallel system so good that nobody can ignore it. And that means cash pay, ease of use, all those kinds of things. It is transformation, but it is one step at a time.
And that's the way to do it. Yeah. God bless.
So, and Texas, we're a big state. We often think we're our own country. And where we go, people follow. So I'm looking forward to seeing that and having more conversation about how those simple little things, not so simple, not so little, but it's a tiny little step, will help transform an industry that does need it desperately.
Yes, no question. And it's been going on for years. Presidents have tried and failed.
Yeah, because top down.
Yeah.
So how can I ensure that the transformation that I'm trying to make aligns with the overall business strategy? Because
Oh, and
sometimes people are
yeah,
just like, let's do this.
yeah. So it's really a reverse, right? You sort of start out with what is it that I'm looking to transform and why? Get that down first, and then you build that business strategy. I think it's really important. If you have a vision for where you want to go, your North Star, that is the dream, right? So strategy becomes the plan for the dream. And in strategy, Gavin defines it, which I love, as how are we harnessing our assets in pursuit of that goal? So, for example, you have a company that says, we want to put all of our eggs in cyber, in security. Making this up, but say that's the case. But then they throw 5 resources against it. And all the other assets are in the core business. Likelihood of that succeeding is not very good. So it's about business strategy is what exactly is my plan to go from my current reality to this future that I'm trying to create? What's my plan? And once you have the milestones, the key milestones worked out and a realistic timeline, then you can think about the areas that require transformation along the way. And maybe it isn't 3 initiatives for the whole company. Maybe you take 3 or 4 functions and you say, finance, I want your 3 big. Marketing, I want your 3 big. And each of them are working on 3 of their large initiatives to drive that change through the company. That then becomes the opportunity to move a little more rapidly and to divide and conquer. And you need a very agile approach. So you do it in sprints, iterate, mid-course correct, iterate, mid-course correct. But you don't want to start a transformation without an understanding of that future vision and at least the tenets of what that business strategy looks like. Some key milestones.
So no shiny object syndrome, basically.
Right.
So I know a lot of entrepreneurs. This one.
And you make sure too that it's in line with your DNA.
This to me sounds like a very personal process and a very human-centric process. And I know when we change things here, we may change a piece of technology, but the change is very human-centric, right?
Yeah.
What do we need? How are we going to do it? Besides conversations and facilitation and a consultant to help, right? Because I think big transformations need some structure and some planning. Are there technologies that you use, or is this basically intellectual framework and process?
I think there's process for sure. I think AI today with intelligent prompts is an extraordinary tool, and some, technology can be used, digital ways in which you serve your customers, digital ways in which you serve your employees. It used to be that you called up the benefits department and you've got somebody on the phone and they told you everything. Now you don't need to do that. You can go online. And if we can make it as easy as buying an airline ticket, then that's the way you want it to be. So as much of the everyday administrative tasks that can be done digitally and quickly, you want to definitely employ technology. And so it's a balance. Where do we use technology? How much process? Allison, the biggest mistake people make is the thinking process and procedure are one of the same things. Process is a very iterative thing. It is the relationship between the work and the way you get work done. Procedure, and it's a tool. Procedure tells you what you can and cannot do. It's a rule. And the third P is practice. It's what you're actually doing. So if you think of it as process is my tool, procedure is my rule, and practice is what I actually do. The tool helps me do what I do. The rule gives me a guide as to what I can and cannot do. And we have to keep those things clear in our heads.
And practice makes sure you can do it with reasonable effectiveness.
Absolutely. Then you can come back and you can iterate on the process, or you change the procedure. Should always have more process than you do have procedure.
What how do you sustain transformation? How do you sustain things, the gelling, so to speak, between Mac and Estee Lauder? How do you sustain that?
It has to become practice. Um, there is no way to continue to oversight that. If you've had a successful transformation, it gels because the work makes sense and
Okay.
because people and what they're doing, and then people adopt it. Adoption is critical. If you don't have adoption, no amount of constant consulting and change management efforts and all of that, execution validates strategy. Period.
Okay. And I know we have a hard stop in a couple of minutes, but I want to go back to the chocolate conversation. And I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about, we talked about concerns being the human level. Then we talked about standards, what we do around here. And then we talked about worldview. And I think often that transformations and growth and even everyday change management fail because somebody's talking about a truffle and somebody's talking about a Milky Way.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about, as a leader, how you have those conversations with people?
Yeah, I think it's really important to ask people what they need, especially when people are complaining or expressing their concerns. Not to take that as be defensive. They don't want to do the change. They're not in it. They're not loyal to what we're trying to accomplish here. Look at a concern as something that is a valuable tool. When it's being expressed, you can then think it's only an unmet need. That's all it is an unmet need. Standards are visible to us. Worldviews are not. Standards people see. If you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. That's the way this one boss always thought. Being on time was being 5 minutes early. If you didn't know that was what was going on, that was visible. But what was his worldview? He came from a military background, and that's what he saw as critical. Everybody has to begin to understand why people think the way they think and why they feel the way they do. So ask a lot of questions, listen twice as much as you talk, help people see things differently, then they'll do them differently. And with that, I'm afraid I have a hard stop.
So do I. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to us, and we'll